My name is Jessica, and I am 68 years old. For most of those years, I believed in the quiet strength of family, in the unspoken promises that bind a mother to her children. I see now that some promises are not quiet bonds, but silent, heavy chains we wrap around ourselves. And sometimes the only way to be free is to let them drop with a crash so loud it shatters everything you thought you knew. My story isn't about revenge. Not at first, it was about survival. But I've learned that when you've been pushed to the very edge of who you are, survival and revenge can start to look an awful lot alike. It all started, as so many heartbreaks do, with a kindness. My son Wade is a notary public. He has a small, slightly dusty office in a strip mall between a laundromat and a pizza place, the kind of office that always smells faintly of stale coffee and industrial-grade carpet cleaner. He's always been what my late husband, Robert, used to call aggressively helpful. He doesn't just offer to help. He insists positioning himself as the savvy, indispensable son, managing his aging mother's affairs. He thought he was clever. For a long time, I let him believe it. It was easier that way. It was a role I played, the slightly doddery matriarch, because it seemed to make him happy, and a mother's happiness is so often tied to the contentment of her children. What a fool I was. The paperwork he brought over was for my estate. He'd spread the documents across my dining room table, the very table where I'd helped him with his multiplication homework, and soothed his tears over scraped knees. He used a lot of jargon, words like probates and executor and power of attorney, tapping his pen on the pages with an air of great importance. He said he was just tidying things up, making it easier for me, making sure everything was in order so that he and his sister Clara wouldn't have to deal with a mess later on. He made it sound like a favor, a burden he was shouldering. He spoke to me in that slow, patient voice people use for children and the very old, and I just smiled and nodded, letting the sound wash over me. Trust is a habit, you see. For 40 years I had trusted my son. It was a muscle I didn't even know how to stop flexing, so I signed where he told me to sign. My hand, a little shaky with age, traced the familiar shape of my name over and over again. He'd point, I'd sign. He'd turn a page, I'd sign again. He'd neatly stack the signed pages, tap them into a perfect pile, and slip them into his briefcase with a self-satisfied smile. He patted my hand. He told me I was a smart woman for getting this all taken care of. Then he left, and the silence he left behind felt different. It felt heavier. The discovery came about a month later. It was an accident, a piece of mail sent to my house by mistake instead of his, an official-looking envelope from the county records office. My name was on it, but the address for the property in question was not my primary residence. It was the address for the Heron's Nest. My cabin. My cabin. It was a confirmation of a recent title transfer. I didn't understand. I hadn't transferred any title. With a feeling like ice water seeping into my bones, I opened it, and there it was, in stark bureaucratic black and white, a copy of a quit-claim deed. The Heron's Nest, the beautiful rustic A-frame cabin my Robert had built with his own 2 hands on the shore of Silver Lake, had been transferred from Jessica M. Albright, me, to Wade T. Albright, my son. The purchase price was listed as $1, a gift, and at the bottom there was my signature, or a clever, cruel imitation of it, a forgery. I sat there in my armchair, the letter shaking in my hand, and I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a house. It was the heart of my life with Robert. It was the scent of pine needles after rain, the sound of the screen door slapping shut, the feel of the worn wooden floorboards under our bare feet. It was the place I went to feel close to him after he was gone. It was a cathedral of our shared memories, and my son, my own flesh and blood, had just taken it. He had used my trust as a weapon against me, smiling in my face while he slipped the knife in. He hadn't just stolen a piece of property, he had stolen a piece of my past. He had vandalized my memories. And in that moment, the love I had for him, that vast, unconditional ocean of a mother's love, began to recede, leaving behind a cold, barren shoreline of betrayal. He thought he was clever. He had no idea what he had just awakened in his confused old mother. The first 48 hours after I found the deed were a blur of cold, quiet shock. I didn't cry. I think I was too stunned, too hollowed out for tears. It was a feeling deeper than sadness, a seismic shift in the very bedrock of my world. A son is supposed to be a safe harbor. My son was a pirate, looting the shores of his own family. I just sat in Robert's old leather chair, the one with the permanent impression of his shoulders, and I held the fraudulent deed in my hands, tracing the forged signature with my fingertip. It was close. It was a good forgery. He'd obviously practiced. The thought of him, my Wade, sitting at his desk, scrawling my name over and over again until he got it just right, that was the thought that made my stomach clench. It wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a premeditated act of plunder. My mind kept replaying that afternoon at the dining table, his condescending patience, his neat stacks of paper. I had been so preoccupied with playing the part of the frail, grateful mother that I hadn't looked. Not really. I had trusted, and he had counted on that. He had weaponized 30 years of my maternal instinct against me. The shame of it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. How could I have been so blind? What had I done to raise a son who could look me in the eye and lie with such ease, who could steal the very sanctuary I'd built with his father? The question spiraled, dragging me down into a dark vortex of self-doubt. It's a terrible thing when someone else's betrayal makes you question yourself. Had I spoiled him? Had I not been a good enough mother? Was this somehow my fault? This is the insidious nature of emotional abuse. The victim starts looking for the cause within themselves. I wandered through my house like a ghost, picking up photographs. Here was Wade at 5, a gap-toothed grin on his face, holding up a string of fish he'd caught with Robert at the lake. Here he was at his high school graduation, his arm around me, looking so proud. And here he was at his wedding, my hand on his, telling him how much his father would have loved his bride. Which one was the real Wade? Was this grasping, greedy man always there, lurking behind the smile? My mind drifted back, searching for clues, for the breadcrumbs that led to this awful moment. I remembered when he was a teenager. Robert had bought him a used car, a sturdy old thing, on the condition that Wade get a part-time job to pay for the gas and insurance. Wade had agreed. A month later, I found my emergency cash stash. A few $100s I kept in a coffee can in the pantry was empty. When I confronted him, he'd been so convincingly shocked, so hurt that I would even suspect him. He'd pointed the finger at a friend of his, a troubled boy from down the street. I wanted to believe him so badly that I did. I even felt guilty for accusing him. Robert had been skeptical. He'd looked at me and said, quietly, "Jessica, love, you see the son you want to see. I'm afraid I'm seeing the son we have." The memory, once a minor marital disagreement, now felt like a prophecy. Robert had seen it, and I had refused to. And then there was the matter of the heron's nest itself. That cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was a testament. Robert had been a carpenter, a man who spoke more fluently with a hammer and saw than with words. When we first bought the small plot of land on Silver Lake, It was just a tangle of birch trees and wild brambles. But Robert had a vision. For 2 years, every weekend, every vacation, we were up there. I'd make sandwiches and iced tea while he worked. The sound of his saw a constant, reassuring hum against the chirping of the birds. He taught me how to frame a wall, how to lay shingles. He let me nail in the last board on the little porch that overlooked the water. When it was done, he'd carved our initials into the main support beam inside, RA plus JA. He'd turned to me, his hands calloused and his face splattered with sawdust, and said, "This is our forever place, Jess. This is where our family's memories will live. Promise me you'll always keep it for that, for memories, not for money." I promised. It was the most solemn vow of my life, besides our wedding vows, and after he passed, that promise became my anchor. The cabin was where I went to speak to him. It was where I took my daughter Clara and her children to tell them stories about their grandfather. Wade rarely came. He'd always complained about the drive, the mosquitoes, the lack of reliable cell service. He called it Mom's rustic obsession. He saw it as an asset, a line item on a balance sheet. He never saw its soul, and now he'd stolen the balance sheet, forgetting that the soul was still mine. The catalyst for my resolve came from an unexpected place. I was going through a box of Robert's old things, looking for a photo, and my hand brushed against a small, leather-bound journal. I had forgotten all about it. It was his project journal for the cabin. Inside were his meticulous drawings, his lists of materials, his calculations, but tucked into the back was an entry from the week before he died. His handwriting was weak, shaky from the illness that was taking him, but the words were clear. He wrote about his pride in Clara, about her steady heart, and her kindness. Then he wrote about Wade. "I worry about Wade," it read. "He has a hole in him that he tries to fill with things, with status, with other people's approval. He thinks being clever is the same as being wise, and being successful is the same as being good. I've tried to teach him that a man's worth is in the sturdiness of what he builds, not the flash of what he owns." I don't know if he ever listened. Jess, my love, if you're reading this, be strong, protect what we built. Not just the wood and nails, but the heart of it. Don't let his emptiness consume our legacy. Reading those words was like a lightning strike to my soul. The grief and shame that had paralyzed me burned away, and what was left was a core of pure, unadulterated steel. Robert had seen it, he had known, and he had trusted me to be the guardian of our legacy. My son had not only betrayed me, he had betrayed his father's memory. He had declared war on the very heart of our family. The fog of my sorrow lifted, and in its place was a chilling, crystalline clarity. A direct confrontation would be useless. He would lie, he would gaslight me, call me confused, maybe even try to have me declared incompetent. He had shown his hand. He believed he was dealing with a weak, sentimental old woman. He was about to find out how wrong he was. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself as I closed the journal. It was about honoring a promise, but a small, cold voice in the back of my mind whispered a correction. It wasn't about revenge, until it was, and in that moment, the plan began to form, not as a complex strategy, but as a single, perfect, ironic idea. Wade was a notary. He loved the pomp and circumstance of his little rubber stamp. He loved feeling important. Well, I decided I was going to make him feel very, very important. The first call I made was to Margaret. Margaret and I have been friends for over 40 years, ever since our daughters were in kindergarten together. She's a retired paralegal, a woman with a mind as sharp as a tack, and a healthy cynicism for the motives of men, born from 3 decades of working in family law. She's the kind of friend who doesn't offer you a tissue when you're crying. She offers you a shovel and asks where you need to dig. When she answered the phone, her voice was its usual cheerful, no-nonsense self. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I just said, "Margaret, I need your brain and possibly your lack of a moral gag reflex." There was a pause, and then a low chuckle. "Jessica Albright, what have you gotten yourself into? Let me put the kettle on. You sound like you're about to burn down the world and toast marshmallows over the embers." I went to her house an hour later, the fraudulent deed and Robert's journal tucked into my purse like evidence for a trial. I laid it all out on her kitchen table, next to a plate of her famous lemon shortbread cookies, which suddenly seemed wildly out of place in the middle of my life's wreckage. I told her everything. The paperwork, the signature, the county records notice, Robert's words. I talked for nearly an hour straight, the words pouring out of me in a torrent of long-suppressed hurt and newfound fury. Margaret listened patiently, her sharp blue eyes fixed on my face. She didn't interrupt once. She just nodded, her expression growing progressively more grim. When I was finished, she picked up the copy of the deed and held it under her reading lamp, examining the signature. "The little monster," she said, her voice flat. "He's got your loop on the jazz down perfectly. But the pressure is all wrong. It's too heavy, too deliberate. A forger's hand, not a mother's." She looked up at me, her gaze piercing. "So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Are we calling the police and the district attorney, or are we going for something a little more biblical?" "I can't call the police, Maggie," I said, the words tasting like ash. "He's still my son. A public scandal, a trial, it would destroy Clara. It would be a stain on our family forever. No, this needs to be handled differently, quietly, but definitively." "I was hoping you'd say that," she said, a slow, wolfish grin spreading across her face. "Police reports are so impersonal. So what's the plan?" And that's when I told her my idea. The idea that had come to me in a flash of cold inspiration. I'm going to write a new will, an ironclad one, and I'm going to get Wade to notarize it. Margaret stared at me for a long moment, and then she let out a bark of laughter, so loud it made her cat jump off the sofa. "Oh, Jessica, that is magnificently vicious. I approve, the sheer beautiful irony of it. He stamps his own damnation. It's Shakespearean." Her laughter subsided, and her paralegal brain kicked into gear. "Okay, let's wargame this. It's a brilliant move, but it has to be executed perfectly. We can't leave any loopholes for his weasel lawyer to crawl through later." For the next 2 weeks, Margaret's kitchen became our command center. We drank gallons of tea and ate our way through a mountain of shortbread as we plotted. This is where her expertise became my greatest weapon. "First thing," she said, tapping a pen on a yellow legal pad, "the document itself. It can't be a simple one-page I disinherit Wade letter. That's too easy for him to spot, even if he's not paying attention. It needs to look boring. It needs to look official and mind-numbingly bureaucratic, just like the other papers he had you sign." So we began to draft the new will. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese. We titled it "The Last Will and Testament and Final Directive of Jessica M. Albright." It was 12 pages long. The first few pages were standard fare, appointing Clara as the sole executrix, instructions for my funeral, small bequests to my grandchildren. It was the boring boilerplate stuff we knew Wade would skim over, if he looked at all. The real poison was buried deep in the middle, in a section titled Article 4, Distribution of the Residuary Estate. We started the section with a long, dense paragraph about the definition of the estate, listing bank accounts, stocks, and personal property. And then we dropped the bomb. I wrote the words myself, with Margaret guiding the phrasing to make it legally sound. Asterisk, with full knowledge and clear intent, I explicitly and unequivocally disinherit my son, Wade Thomas Albright, from this will and any and all subsequent codicils. He shall receive no part of my estate, tangible or intangible, real or personal. This decision is not made out of a lack of affection, but as a direct and unavoidable consequence of his actions, specifically, the fraudulent and unauthorized transfer of the property, commonly known as the Heron's Nest, effected on or about the 15th of May, through an act of forgery and profound familial betrayal. All assets, rights, and properties that would have passed to Wade T. Albright shall instead be directed in their entirety to my daughter Clara Elizabeth Jensenot. We didn't stop there. We added another clause, a masterstroke of Margaret's devising. It stated that a significant portion of the estate's liquid assets was to be set aside in a legal fund, managed by Clara, for the express purpose of recovering any and all assets misappropriated from the estate prior to my passing. We were essentially creating a war chest for Clara to use to sue Wade to get the cabin back, funded by the inheritance he himself had just forfeited. Now for the execution, Margaret said, her eyes gleaming. The notarization, a notary's primary job, is to verify the identity of the signer and to witness that the person is signing of their own free will, without duress. The beauty of this is that Wade, in his official capacity as a notary, will be legally attesting that you, Jessica Albright, are of sound mind and body and are willingly signing a document. He becomes a witness against his own future claim that you were confused or coerced. But what about other witnesses? I asked. Technically, for a formal will in our state, you need two independent witnesses who aren't beneficiaries, she explained. But we're going to be clever about this. We're going to lean into the plausible inaccuracies you mentioned. Many people, including lazy notaries, confuse the act of notarization with the act of witnessing a will. They think the stamp covers everything. We're going to count on his arrogance and his haste, but just in case, we'll have a backup. She tapped the legal pad. The security camera, you said his office has one? Yes, a little black dome on the ceiling in the corner. I remembered. Perfect, she said. That camera is our silent, impartial witness. Before you go, you'll send a registered letter to the building's management company, formally requesting they preserve all security footage from that day for a potential legal matter. You don't have to say what. That creates a paper trail. The footage will show you walking in, sitting down, having a conversation, and signing the document. It will show him stamping it. It will show him not reading a single word. It will be a video recording of his own professional negligence. The plan was audacious. It was cold. It relied entirely on my ability to play a role, the frail, confused old woman, and on my son's hubris. A part of me, a small, flickering ember of the mother I used to be, felt a pang of sorrow. I was setting a trap for my own child. But then I would look at Robert's journal, at his shaky, loving words, and the steel would return to my spine. He didn't want my money. He wanted my soul, my legacy, my memories. He had tried to erase my life with Robert for the price of a lakefront property. He was about to find out that some things are not for sale. The day I chose to execute the plan was a dreary Tuesday, the sky the color of wet cement. It seemed appropriate. I dressed the part carefully, a beige cardigan over a flowered blouse, comfortable orthopedic shoes, my reading glasses perched on my nose. I even practiced a slight doddering tremor in my hand as I held my teacup that morning. I had to be utterly convincing. I was about to give the performance of my life. I drove to Wade's office, the 12-page will tucked into a large manila envelope. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but my face was a mask of serene, slightly vacant confusion. I had called him earlier that morning, my voice pitched a little higher, a little more fragile than usual. Wade, dear, it's Mom. I'm so sorry to bother you at work, but I have some papers here. My lawyer sent them over. Something about updating the trust. It's all so confusing. Could you possibly just take a look and put your official stamp on my signature? It would make me feel so much better. His sigh on the other end of the line was audible, a gust of put upon patience. Mom, I'm really swamped today. Can't it wait? Oh, oh, of course, dear, I said, letting my voice waver. It's just I'll be in town for my doctor's appointment this afternoon anyway, and I hate having these important things just floating around. But if you're too busy, I let the sentence hang there, the unspoken guilt a carefully deployed weapon. Another deeper sigh. No, no, it's fine. I can squeeze you in around 2, but I only have a few minutes, okay? I have a real estate closing after that. Oh, thank you, sweetie. You're such a good son, I said, and the lie almost choked me. Walking into his office felt like stepping onto a stage. The smell of stale coffee was stronger than I remembered. A wilting fern sat on top of a filing cabinet, its fronds brown and curling. Wade was on the phone, waving me impatiently toward the chair opposite his desk. He finished his call with a loud, self-important, "Just get it done," and then turned his attention to me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Okay, Mom, what have you got? Let's make this quick." I pulled the manila envelope from my bag, my hands performing the slight tremble I had practiced. I slid the thick stack of papers out and pushed it across the desk toward him. "It's just this, dear. I think it's the will, or the trust. It's all so complicated. I just need to sign it, and they said I needed a notary." He picked up the document, his thumb flicking through the pages with dismissive speed. He glanced at the first page, the last will and testament, and then tossed it back onto the desk. He didn't even skim the second page. His focus was on the last page, the signature page, which we had formatted to look as standard as possible. "Right, okay. Standard will, just sign here," he said, tapping a line at the bottom, "and I'll notarize it." My gaze flickered up for a fraction of a second, to the little black dome of the security camera mounted on the ceiling. Its tiny red light was on. It was watching. It was recording. Our silent, perfect witness. I took the pen he offered. My hand was genuinely shaking now, not from play acting, but from the sheer icy audacity of what I was doing. I looked at the signature line. Beneath it was the standard attestation clause Margaret had insisted we use, the one that stated I was signing in the presence of the undersigned notary public, declaring this to be my last will and testament, and I am of sound mind and memory and not under any duress or undue influence. I took a deep breath and signed my name. Jessica M. Albright, my real signature this time, firm and clear. I pushed the document back to him. Wade didn't even look at it. He was already reaching for his notary kit. He opened his journal, made a quick entry, and then picked up his stamp. The stamp he was so proud of, the emblem of his authority. He pressed it onto the ink pad and then brought it down onto the paper with a solid, satisfying thump. He scribbled his own signature next to the seal, his commission number underneath. It was done. He pushed the document back to me. "There you go, all official. Now, was that so hard?" he asked, a condescending smirk on his face. "No, dear," I said, my voice quiet. I carefully folded the document and slid it back into the manila envelope. "Thank you. You've been a great help." I stood up, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. As I turned to leave, I paused at the door. "You work so hard, Wade. I hope you get everything you deserve." He just grunted, already turning back to his computer screen. He didn't catch the double meaning. He didn't catch the glint of cold triumph in his frail old mother's eyes. He didn't see the guillotine he had just personally and professionally validated. I walked out of that strip mall and into the gray afternoon, clutching the envelope to my chest. I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, chilling sense of victory, mixed with an equally profound sadness. The son I had loved was gone. In his place was a stranger I had just legally and methodically disarmed. The first part of the takeover was complete. It had been silent, it had been bloodless, and it had been absolute. The first ripple from the stone I dropped into the pond didn't take long to reach the shore. The day after my visit to Wade's office, I took 3 actions, just as Margaret and I had planned. First, I went to my bank and placed a password on all my accounts that only I knew, along with a note on the file that my son, Wade Albright, was explicitly not authorized to make inquiries or transactions. Second, I sent the registered letter to the management company of Wade's office building, formally requesting the preservation of security footage, citing a pending legal review. Finally, and most importantly, I made a copy of the newly notarized will, put it in an express envelope, along with a long handwritten letter, and sent it to my daughter Clara. Clara is the opposite of Wade in every way. She is quiet where he is loud, thoughtful where he is impulsive, and her heart is filled with a deep, uncomplicated kindness. She's a first-grade teacher in a small town 3 hours away, married to a good man, with 2 wonderful children. She had always been the responsible one, the one who called me every Sunday just to chat, the one who sent me photos of the kids without being asked. My betrayal of Wade felt, in a way, like a final affirmation of my love for her and the values she embodied, the values Robert and I had tried to instill in both our children. My letter to her was the hardest thing I have ever had to write. I told her everything, leaving out no detail of Wade's deceit. I enclosed a copy of the fraudulent deed and a photo of the entry from her father's journal. I explained the new will and the reasons behind it. I wrote, "My dearest Clara, I have not done this to punish your brother, but to protect your father's legacy and to honor the promise I made to him. The heron's nest was never about money. It was about memory. Your brother tried to steal those memories from all of us. This is not about choosing between my children. This is about choosing between what is right and what is wrong. I have put the future of our family's heart in your hands because I know you, unlike him, will know what to do with it." 3 days later, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was thick with tears. "Mom, I got your package. I can't believe it. I've read it 3 times. It can't be true. Wade wouldn't do that." There was a part of her that, like me, wanted to believe in the brother she grew up with. "Clara, honey," I said, my own voice gentle but firm, "look at the deed. Look at Dad's journal. You know it's true. You've seen the way he is. You've just always chosen to look away, to keep the peace." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken by a shuddering sob. "The cabin," she whispered. "Grandpa Robert's cabin. He was going to sell it, wasn't he? That's why he did it." "I believe so. Yes," I said. "I'm going to call him," she said, her voice suddenly hardening, the sorrow replaced by a quiet fury that sounded so much like her father's. "Be careful, honey," I warned. "He will lie. Let him," she said, and hung up. That was the beginning of the power shift. The exodus wasn't a grand public affair. It was the quiet, devastating departure of a sibling's love and respect. Clara's confrontation with Wade wasn't a shouting match. As she told me later, she drove to his office that very afternoon. She walked in and closed the door behind her. She didn't raise her voice. She simply placed a copy of the forged deed on his desk. According to her, Wade just stared at it, his face going pale. "Where did you get this?" he stammered. "Mom sent it to me," Clara said, her voice dangerously calm. along with a copy of her new will, the one you notarized on Tuesday. That's when the real panic must have set in. Wade started blustering, falling back on his usual tactics. He denied everything. He claimed I was getting old, that I was confused, that I was being manipulated by Clara. He tried to turn it around on her, accusing her of trying to poison me against him to get a larger inheritance. But Clara didn't waver. She had seen the evidence. She had read our father's words. The scales had fallen from her eyes. "Don't you dare, Wade," she said, her voice like ice. "Don't you dare try to make this about me, or say Mom is confused. You forged her name. You stole Dad's legacy. For what? For money. Are you that desperate?" It was that question, she said, that finally broke through his wall of denial. His face crumpled. It turned out he was in deep financial trouble. A series of bad investments, some loans he couldn't pay back. He'd seen the cabin as his easy way out, a quick six-figure sale to solve all his problems. He had valued his financial comfort over his family's heart. He then made his final, fatal mistake. He tried to appeal to their shared childhood, to her sense of family loyalty. He started pleading, "Clara, you have to help me. You have to talk to Mom. Make her see reason. We can fix this. It was just a piece of paper. We're family." Clara told me she looked at him then, at her brother with his panicked eyes and his pathetic excuses, and she felt nothing but a profound emptiness. "No, Wade," she said, her voice final. Asterisk. "You asterisk fix this. But we are not a Wade anymore. You broke that. Mom and I are family. You are just the man who tried to rob us." She turned and walked out, leaving him there with the evidence of his crime and the dawning, terrifying realization that the game was up. The power had shifted, and he was on the wrong side of the new reality. The final confrontation was not of my choosing. Wade forced it. A few days after his disastrous meeting with Clara, he showed up at my house unannounced. I saw his car pull into the driveway, and my body went on high alert, but my mind was eerily calm. I had been preparing for this moment. I was ready. He used his key to let himself in, a violation that sent a fresh wave of cold anger through me. He strode into the living room where I was reading, his face a thunderous mask of rage and desperation. He was no longer the slick, condescending son. This was the cornered animal, lashing out. "What have you done?" he snarled, his voice trembling with fury. "You and Clara, you're trying to ruin me." She came to my office, spouting all this nonsense about a new will. I slowly closed my book, placed it on the end table, and looked up at him. I did not raise my voice. I kept it level, almost conversational. "It's not nonsense, Wade. It's a legally executed document. A document you tricked me into signing," he yelled, his face turning a blotchy red. "You took advantage of me. You know I was busy. You came in here with your whole confused old lady act." His voice trailed off as he heard his own words, the admission of his negligence hanging in the air between us. I just stared at him. "My act, or your assumption? You assumed I was confused. You assumed I was frail. You assumed I wouldn't read the papers you gave me. And you were right. And then you assumed I wouldn't read the papers I gave you. And you were right about that too. This is not about my trickery, Wade. This is about your arrogance." He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "This won't stand up in court. I'll contest it. I'll say you were incompetent, that Clara unduly influenced you. This was the moment. The checkmate." I leaned back in my chair, my hands folded calmly in my lap. "Will you?" I asked, my voice soft. "That will be difficult, because on Tuesday, at approximately 2:15 p.m., you, Wade T. Albright, a commissioned notary public for this state, affixed your official seal to a document in which you attested, under penalty of perjury, that I, Jessica M. Albright, was of sound mind and memory, and was signing of my own free will, without duress or undue influence. You might want to think about what a judge would say when you argue that you are a notary who can't be trusted to ascertain the competence of your own mother. He stopped pacing. The color drained from his face. He looked like he'd been slapped. And then there's the matter of the witness. I continued, my voice still quiet, relentless. You see, when you notarized my will, you created a legal record. But there was another witness in the room. A silent one. It's a little black dome on the ceiling of your office. A security camera. It recorded our entire transaction. It recorded you not reading the document. It recorded you stamping your own disinheritance. Clara's lawyer has already subpoenaed the footage. It seems your professional negligence is very well documented. He sank onto the sofa, as if his legs had given out. The fight was gone, replaced by a gray hollow shock. He finally understood. He was trapped, not by me, not by Clara, but by his own actions. Every door he could have used to escape was one he himself had locked and bolted. And the cabin weighed, I said, delivering the final blow, the heron's nest. You seem to have forgotten a key detail of the will you so helpfully notarized. It establishes a rather substantial legal fund, managed by Clara, for the sole purpose of recovering misappropriated assets. The fraudulent deed you filed is a public record. The new will is a legal directive. The fight for that cabin will now be between Clara's legal team and you. A legal team funded by the very estate you are no longer a part of. You are on an island, Wade, and you are the one who set fire to all the boats. He just sat there, staring into space, the full weight of his ruin finally crashing down on him. He had lost everything: the inheritance, the cabin, his sister, his mother. He had even destroyed his own career, because a complaint to the notary commission with this evidence would mean the end of his license and his livelihood. He had gambled his family's love against his greed, and he had lost in the most absolute way imaginable. I looked at my son, this broken man on my sofa, and I didn't feel hatred. I didn't even feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt a deep, profound, and heartbreaking pity. He was the empty man his father had worried about, and he had finally been consumed by it. I stood up. I think it's time for you to leave, I said softly. Please leave the key on the counter. He didn't look at me. He just nodded, a slow, empty gesture. He stood, walked to the kitchen, and placed his key on the granite countertop. The small metallic click was the last sound he would ever make in my home. And then he was gone. The charade was over. In the end, it played out exactly as Margaret and I had planned. Wade's attempts to fight the will were futile. His own notarization was an insurmountable legal obstacle. Faced with the security footage and the threat of a formal complaint that would ruin him professionally, he capitulated. He signed a new quitclaim deed, transferring the heron's nest back to my name, in exchange for Clara agreeing not to pursue legal action for the initial fraud. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a pragmatic, clean severing of the final tie. He walked away with nothing but his debts and the knowledge of what he had destroyed. I haven't spoken to him since that day. Sometimes I wonder if he feels remorse, but I suspect he only feels the bitterness of being outsmarted. Life is quieter now, but it is a good quiet. It is the quiet of peace, not the quiet of suppression. Clara and we took a trip up to the Heron's Nest last fall, the first time I'd been back since the betrayal. As I stepped onto the porch, the familiar scent of pine and lake water filled my lungs, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel tainted. It felt like coming home. Clara had brought a wood-burning kit, and together we added the initials of her children next to the RA plus JA that Robert had carved so many years ago. We were adding a new layer of memory, a new chapter. We were honoring his legacy. Looking back, I see the whole ugly affair with a different kind of clarity. It wasn't just about a house or a will. It was about my own liberation. For years, I had made myself smaller to accommodate my son's ego. I had absorbed his casual cruelty, his dismissiveness, and called it a mother's patience. The truth is, I was enabling him. My love had become a crutch for his bad character. His betrayal, as painful as it was, forced me to finally stand up, not just for Robert's memory, but for myself. It forced me to find a strength I didn't know I had. So here is what I want to say to you, to anyone out there who feels taken for granted, who feels like their kindness is being mistaken for weakness. Your worth is not determined by those who refuse to see it. Your boundaries are not a suggestion, they are a necessity for your own survival. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and even for the person who is hurting you, is to let them face the full and undiluted consequences of their own actions. It is not your job to cushion their fall, especially when they are the one who pushed you off the ledge. My son thought he was clever, but he forgot the most important thing. He forgot that the quiet, unassuming woman who raised him also buried the love of her life, managed a household, and navigated 6 decades of this messy, complicated world. We older women are not frail artifacts to be managed. We are libraries of experience, of resilience, of love, and of loss. And when you try to burn down a library, you'd better be prepared for the fire. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever felt overlooked or betrayed by someone you trusted, please share your experience in the comments below. It's important for us to know we're not alone. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories of justice and vindication. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Remember to be strong, be wise, and never ever let anyone mistake your grace for weakness.